Hi everyone. So we'll get started. We only have I think like 30 minutes. So hey, that's not bad. We killed like 12 minutes. István, how are you, man? It's been a while.
Good, pretty good. Good. Thanks for asking. Always good. Life is getting back to normal, which is great.
Fingers
I've been
crossed.
waiting for this moment for a while.
Good. Well, listen. Let's jump into it, man. Like, how's business? Well, number one for people who don't know, right? Maybe you can tell people very quickly who you are and tell people sort of about
Sure.
your company and how long you guys been around. Very quickly.
Sure. Yeah. Super quickly. So
Yeah.
Shapr was founded in 2016, and our ambition is to reinvent the design and manufacturing software industry from scratch, and create a company that will dominate this space for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And we started with an iPad Pro app, an iPad Pro CAD app, where we with a mobile first approach, and now we are expanding to other platforms. Most recently, we released Shapr3D for Mac, and we are about to publicly launch Shapr3D for Windows as well. And these are basically the first step towards becoming a full-featured 3D design tool for professionals, transitioning from being just a sketching or ideation or prototyping tool to become this full-featured tool for professional designers. And we are innovating both on the product and on the distribution side. So on the product side, I think even for like probably for everyone, it's clear what we are doing if you check out our website. But on the distribution side, I think it's equally exciting what we are doing, because in an industry that is dominated by top-down distribution, VAR networks, we built a consumer-grade growth engine that allows us to run an incredibly cash-efficient bottom-up distribution strategy, casting an extremely wide net and monetizing a really broad range of customers, from prosumers to Fortune 500 companies.
So let me ask you a question. So this is basically you're following like the product-led growth strategy, right? Which is now,
Yes.
sort of I would say the predominant model for a lot of the SaaS companies that are actually, I'd say in the last like 2 or 3 years, this is actually where a lot of the growth companies have actually sort of like come from. Would you agree?
Yes, that's true. That's true. And I think there is a lot of confusion around PLG. Like some companies call a great user experience PLG, but it's really not. Some companies call a low touch sales model PLG, which is again not PLG. But I think there are very few like real PLG companies out there. I think we are one of them.
Give me another example. Give me another example of who you think, like, or tell me, give me 1 or 2 examples of people you think they're doing a great job. I'm curious.
Figma, obviously, like they are probably one of the best examples. Loom is amazing.
Yeah, Loom has been crushing it, right? Like they're
clearly, yeah, like typically products that have some sort of viral rule built into the way how the product itself works. So if the product is built in a way that it's designed for sharing, or is designed for collaboration, these are the company. Or Miro, for example. Miro is a great example.
Oh, Miro,
he's
a friend. Yeah, he's doing super well. They're doing really,
absolutely.
Well.
They're fantastic. So these are the typical products that are super successful with PLG.
Yeah. I'm curious, right? So, besides sort of like the coordination / sort of like team sort of like aspects of sort of like your product, why do you think it's working so well?
It's always about, like, first of all, it's always about differentiation, and in our space, it was just obvious that this is a software industry that is ripe for disruption, and it's relatively straightforward. What are the things that could be done much better in 2021? Because these products are all designed, or the traditional CAD products are all designed and built, or were built in the 1990s. And since the 1990s, everything has changed. The way how we worked, our computers, how we collaborate, how we do, basically everything has changed except CAD. And basically what we do at Shapr is we're trying to identify these biggest trends or the biggest changes over the last 30 years that allow us to build something that is a better fit for 2021. And and since really not a lot of innovation has happened in the last 30 years in this space, there are a lot of these, and it's relatively straightforward. What are the things that we have to do to build a differentiated product? So I think this is really the number one reason. The number two reason is really the way how our distribution model works. Just by lowering the barrier of entry to be able to accessing a tool or a software, you completely change the dynamics of how companies adopt new software, or how people adopt new software, how people learn new software. And basically the combination of these two things, like the way how we think about differentiation and the way how we think about distribution, these are the things that the combination of these two things making Shapr work.
Yeah. How was a pandemic for you? Did I assume, with the push for digitalization for a lot of companies, was it like, I knew you guys were growing, like we'd met, I think like 2-3 years ago, right? So I remember when we chatted, growth was pretty good already. I can't imagine growth would probably had slowed down, probably accelerated. How was 2020 for you, and how was 2020 and 2021 for you?
So in the beginning of the pandemic, we got a pretty solid push. Because the entire app store was going like crazy, and we got some of that as well. And like after the pandemic, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to say, but I think we are after the pandemic. so
fingers crossed. We'll see. No, I don't feel like that,
but let's see. But around the so in the beginning of the summer, we slowed down a bit. I think people started to go out and they cared less about what's happening in the digital world and in computers. But actually now that summer is over, now we are accelerating again pretty significantly. So we are doing pretty good. We are by far the most successful CAD company in the last 30 years since SolidWorks, which is quite incredible because we raised a fraction of what other startups raised in the last 30 years, and still we are by far the most successful, both in terms of financials and in terms of customer count.
And tell me a little bit about sort of the big lessons that you got out of the last year, right? So like we haven't actually, honestly, this has been great because we haven't caught up for a long time, so we can do the catch up now. What was the biggest lesson from last year? Because you guys weren't a fully remote company, right?
We transitioned to remote during the pandemic, and I think that we learned how we were not remote first, or we were not even remote friendly before the pandemic. I think we learned how to do remote well. I think that remote is great, but I don't think it's like, I think it's also not superior to office-based working. I think these are complementary. Certain things can be done really well in a remote environment, by other things can be done really well in a co-located environment. So going forward, we decided to have both remote teams and co-located teams. We are not going to have hybrid teams. So we will basically handle remote as a hub, very similar to what Stripe did before the pandemic. I think that's a brilliant approach. So basically, remote at Shapr is going to be like another office with remote processes, with remote management. Like working remotely requires a completely different way of working. It's a bit like oil and water with co-located working. So we will want to be all in remote working, and we want to be all in with office-based working as well. And we would like to take advantage of both approaches.
Yeah. How many people is in your company right now, and sort of what's the breakdown between sort of the remote versus sort of like co-located?
So we are 110, and most of the people we hired over the last 18 months are still in Budapest. But we have quite a few very senior people, especially in engineering, who are not based in Hungary, and we will they are going to be the foundation of our remote team, and we are going to scale it up. But we're going to scale that team up over the next 6 months, the full remote team in the remote hub. But we will stay synchronous. So we are not. I'm not a big fan of async work. I think that introduces a lot of overhead. I think again for certain things that's great, but it's I think at this stage for this company, I think it's much better to stay synchronous. So we will hire from our time zone plus minus 1 hour. And build the remote team from that talent pool.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting where, for just remote work has been an area that's been interesting for a long time. And, I think one observation is just like, it only works where you either do sort of like synchronous or it's like asynchronous. If you do asynchronous, like everybody has to be asynchronous, right? And so it's just one of those things. It's like hybrid versus sort of like the fully remote versus sort of like in office where like you just can't half-ass it. The hybrid is really, really challenging to work, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So you have, I think as a firm, for startup founders out there, just who are thinking through this of just like you like most things in life, you can't half-ass it or try to do both of just like, you really need to be committed to doing one or the other. That's the only way you can actually make it work.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you can't avoid collaboration between the remote hub and the co-located hub. But you want to really well define what are the responsibilities and how those are split up between teams, because those teams are going to work completely differently. And if like the less overlap you have between the two teams, the better probably.
So one of the things I know one of the topics we had sort of thrown out there, right? Because you're a PLG sort of like SaaS play, but at the same time you're not, right? Because like you're not you could be a consumer play, but the reality is that you're tackling, it's not like the typical sort of like SaaS play in the sense that you're going after a very, how should I say, sort of like old industrial. You're building software for sort of like a very, how should I say, traditional industrial, right? Like
yes.
Which is very different,
yes.
right? Like, which for the most part, you said to yourself, most of the sales cycles, most of the processes in the past have been very sort of like enterprise or like reseller sort of like focus, sort of like market. Yeah. So very, very different type. And so you've kind of flipped it on its head. What's besides sort of the new sort of like distribution model, like what's it like and sort of what's the biggest difference, right? Because there are, like I think a lot of the low hanging fruit you could argue in software has been kind of sort of gotten already. And so now you're going after sort of next layer of sort of more, I say challenging problems, I guess.
Yeah. So I think the main difference is that you have to be all in on this. So you can't really do this just a little bit. So either you build everything according to PLG and according to a bottom-up model. You can't really, like, let's say you have a very traditional software. You can't just make it a great fit for this approach, because this approach has to define literally everything you do, including how you onboard your customers, how you think about customer experience, how you think about product design, how you think about like everything.
Yep.
And this is quite I think this is something that is quite visible when you look at Shapr. Like, for example, a large part of the work that VAR does, a value-added reseller does at the traditional CAD companies to onboard the customer, assist them with installing the software and getting started. And we have automated most of that. With an in-app onboarding, with email campaigns, with online tutorials, stuff like that, with automatically nurturing the customer. Also, I think it's quite interesting to if you think about VARs, if you think about value-added resellers, the reason why it's not the right choice in 2021 to go with them, because the market has completely changed. Like, this market is now an incredibly well-educated market. In the 1990s, most people, even who needed CAD, did not know about the existence.
Software wasn't easy to use. Software wasn't easy to use back then.
Exactly, and most people didn't even know that they have a software solution for their problem, and there was no existing demand, so it was really just about educating the market and generating demand. While in 2021, pretty much every single person who needs CAD has one, so it requires a completely different approach. Like like replacing a CAD system, like a traditional CAD system, it's not that straightforward. It's like going to a software engineering company and telling them to replace their programming language. Like, good luck with that. Like, you would never be able to convince a software engineering company to replace their programming language. If you want to be a replacement programming language for their existing solution, then you will probably start as a complementary programming language. For some internal projects, and then maybe some modules are going to be implemented in that programming language, and then maybe eventually over 5 or 10 years they will completely replace their legacy tools. And it's the same with CAD, because these buyers are really well educated about the market. They know exactly what they want, and their CAD systems are business critical tools for running their business. So attacking a market like this requires a very different approach.
Right. And tell me about, we've talked about all the good stuff, right? Like you guys have grown like crazy, except for the summer, right? I think most e-commerce and a lot of software companies took a hit this summer as sort of the world seemed to be coming back to normal in theory. And now we're kind of back to the pandemic world. But I guess what's your, like we don't want to, I think we want to be sort of like real for a lot of folks here. What were the challenges that you guys have had over the last year? Like, right, it wasn't all great.
No, I personally absolutely hated it. It was a really, really awful and depressing period of time. I think humans are social creatures. We just need each other, like physically, and over Zoom you can reproduce these interactions. So I think from building the company's culture perspective, or from the perspective of building the community, the backbone for the company, this was a really challenging period of time, which we have noticed. Like we have seen that engagement rate from in the team was dropping. Like people were extremely exhausted, especially around the end of the pandemic. We have seen mental health issues in the company. But these are things that happen pretty much at every company. But I honestly, I personally care a lot about the team. So for me, this was quite disturbing over the last 18 months. But now it feels like that we had this 3 months of transition. We call this the fuck COVID plan, during which we let everyone take a lot of time off, as much as they needed, and regenerate a bit and heal themselves a bit. And now I feel that the energy is now coming back to the team, and things are getting back to normal, which is amazing. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, and I guess sort of, you've scaled the organization also tremendously in the last year and a half or two, right? So what was the biggest lesson, like this, a lot of startups want to be in your, I think we have a lot of startup founders on this session. What do you think is the biggest lesson, or tips you would probably give them where, like things that you're like, man, I wish I didn't do that, right? Or like things where it's like, wow, like, boy, I'm really glad we did this, right? So maybe some top of the, sort of like top of mind tips of just like some things for any new founders sort of coming in who happen to be, sort of fortunate, smart, lucky to sort of like start the scaling stage.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that we did is that we waited and learned with figuring out how to go forward with remote and hybrid and co-located work. And we just, even until like 4 weeks ago, we were not 100% sure like how to proceed and what the future is going to be like. And I think that a lot of companies and a lot of people made this mistake that they draw long-term conclusion based on an extremely temporary period of time where everything was uncertain and you couldn't really predict what was going to happen. And I mean, I remember 18 months ago, people were saying stuff like this is the new normal. Even 10 years from now, we are not going to have vaccines, and the world has completely changed. And I think this could not be further away from the truth. And I think it was a really, really good idea to wait a little bit more and understand how these events unfold, and then make a much better informed decision eventually.
So basically, don't panic. Basically, net is don't panic.
Don't panic. Yes, exactly. And that was, I mean, now it's super funny looking back, but obviously, like probably you also remember that 80 months ago, like everybody was super anxious. There was a lot of anxiety and
remember when we left our Amazon boxes out front for like a week?
Yeah.
Cleaning the groceries, the groceries.
Exactly, right. And so looking back now, it looks funny, but it was really not 80 months ago. And so I'm not panicking and thinking ahead a little bit. I think that was one of the best things that we did.
And so, like I said, now you have this sort of like new form of, structural organization, so not panicking, sort of like trying to sort of like not overreact. What were the lessons you had in scaling, right? Do you think, like, besides the remote part, like what are the lessons you had in scaling?
Scaling. The biggest lesson is scaling a remote team is tough. It's probably much harder. It's much harder than scaling a co-located team, because especially those parts of the, I mean, from in some ways it's easier. You don't need more office space. You don't. You have a bigger talent pool and so on. But a lot of things that are crucial, like onboarding, getting to know each other, like getting contacts, learning about industry, these are extremely challenging in a remote setup, and you have to be very, very intentional about these things, and you have to invest in these things a lot, like extreme amount of time and effort. And even when you are doing that, it's never going to be as good as doing it in a co-located environment. So these are the things that I think were hardest in this remote environment, and also creative collaboration as you are scaling up in a remote environment is becoming harder and harder. And we try to reproduce our best practices that we had in the office. Like, those are not the right practices for remote collaboration and creative work in a remote environment. So there were quite a few things that we could not really figure out, to be honest, during this time.
And are you guys doing a lot of like documentation, a lot of like, basic sort of like processes? I tell most folks, they're just like, it's not as if you sort of like, you set up remote and you kind of let everyone run wild and free. Like, there's actually, you almost have to sort of think about this as have the processes of a company that's like 3 times larger than yourself.
Yes.
Right. Like you have to be super, super thoughtful, lots of documentation, right?
Yes.
Because, there definitely is something of sort of like the advantage of being sort of co-located, just like you learn in some cases by osmosis or hearing the calls and things, and you don't have that. Right. And so, and you also have to make sure that hiring, actually, I would even argue, becomes even more important, because of you're looking for people that are like self-starters.
Yes, absolutely. And that's true. So we were always relatively good at documentation. So even before the pandemic, we had like super high quality documentation for product specs, for growth experiments, stuff like that. But so that was not too shocking for us. However, the processes and the amount of management overhead that you need for running efficiently a remote organization, it was staggering. So yes, like and the information sharing, because even if you have amazing documentation, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to read it, right? so you can be amazing at documentation if reading that documentation is not part of your culture, then it's gonna be hard. And even if it's part of your culture, like what's the best way to decide what to read and what not to read? You can't read every single document that is being written in the company when you have 120 employees. So it was challenging. All these processes, all the management overhead, that was super hard.
And just if you were just looking back, right, of just sort of, I try to draw out these lessons, and this is something I ask a lot of startup founders too. So, it very, to me at least, it seems very, very obvious that you found product market fit. How long do you think it took you to find product market fit?
I don't believe in the concept of product market fit as a singular event. I think it's something that is constantly changing. But I would say that our first big hit of product market fit took us like 3 years or so, or maybe even more, like around, I would say, the middle of 2018, and we started in 2015. So yeah, like 3 years roughly.
Which is normal, by the way, right? Yeah, it's normal.
Yes,
just for all founders out there, right? Just for all founders out there, product market fit. I haven't seen companies hit that earlier than 2 years. It takes a long time. It's brutal.
Yes, and there is always a next level of product market fit, because typically, like when you see these exponential curves, these are typically not by scaling a single thing up. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's about building more and more and more on the top of what you have, and maybe like being able, like opening up the opportunity for opening up your product for other segments and even bigger opportunities. And these are layers. These are not a single thing scaling like crazy most of them.
Yeah.
So it's not something like, yeah, now we have product market fit and now we just have to pour money into marketing and game over, right?
Or sort of those are the stories are cleaned up afterwards, right? When they don't talk about
Yes.
sort of the multiple S curves of growth, right? So you almost have to look at sort of like different customer segments. And so tell us a little bit more about, as we dig into sort of your business a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about sort of like your core customer segments, right? Because you have like multiple customer segments, like, the prosumer piece you mentioned, there's sort of like, I would say there's the mid-tier sort of like companies, there's enterprise, where, sort of, these are all multiple segments. Where do you feel that you're very, very strong in, and sort of like, I guess, what's the biggest, sort of opportunity in front of you?
Yeah. So Shapr is a product that is built for designing for manufacturing. And that manufacturing technology can be 3D printing or CNC milling or injection molding or whatever else, right? And however, especially bigger companies have extremely sophisticated needs when it comes to manufacturing. It's their core competency. It's something that is a really expensive and a risky process. They have like they are super sensitive for the quality of the tools that they are using for manufacturing. So you can just sit down, build a full-featured CAD system for the enterprise, and then start marketing for them. So instead of that, we started as a conceptual design tool, as a prototyping tool, as an ideation tool, which was already a full-featured tool for hobbyists, but it was a sketching tool or prototyping tool for professionals. And step by step, we were adding more and more and more features to gradually move up market, like from the hobbyists to the prosumers. Now we have prosumers and business customers. Mm-hmm. Now we are moving even further towards business customers. We have a broad range of customers. We even have Fortune 500 companies, quite a few actually, that are using Shapr3D. But the use cases for these different segments are completely different. So for a hobbyist, you're obviously a full feature tool. Now we are a full feature tool for prosumers as well, and a full feature tool for some segments in our business customers. In enterprise, we are definitely a sketching or ideation tool and not a full feature tool. But gradually we are getting there, and step by step we're moving higher and higher on the market.
And what do you feel is sort of the biggest challenge for you over the next, like, I'm gonna say, like 1 to 2 years?
Building the product. A CAD system has incredible depth and breadth. It's a feature play in many ways. So since the market is really well educated, they know exactly what they want and how they want it. You can, you just have to check the boxes. And since Shapr's core value proposition is the amazing user experience and customer experience, we have to build all these features in a way that they have to be delighting to use, not just checking the box is not enough. It has to be amazing. It has to be a wonderful experience. So that's hard, and that's why Shapr is quite engineering heavy, and more than 50% of our headcount is in engineering. Well, the other great challenge I think for the company is to scale further this bottom-up approach, add more go-to-market functions. So until now, we didn't really have any sales or any human intervention in our distribution. Now we are adding a customer success team, which will focus on early engagement, and their KPI is going to be really just the increasing engagement and increasing the success of the customers. And then probably 6 or 12 months from now, we will have to add an inbound sales team, and after that, adding probably an outbound sales team. So scaling up and then continuously improving our go-to-market team is also a pretty massive challenge for the company.
And where, I guess as you think through this, right, like, is the idea, will you have a US presence, or are you thinking about sort of like just, doing this, like I said, remotely?
I think we can do this remotely. Most of this we can do remotely. For salespeople, you have to invest a lot in, and customer success people, you have to invest a lot in educating them. But I think, like maybe flying them here or going there for a couple of months and educating them, onboarding them, then they should be able to do this remotely. So I think these teams are good candidates for the remote hub. Also, I think that we probably at some point of time, I'm not sure when, we will see how the pandemic unfolds from here.
Yeah.
But I think it will make sense to have a physical US office in the over the next couple of years. And I couldn't be more excited about China. I know that a lot of Western companies are quite excited about China because they think it's a great market. But in our case, it's a bit different simply because we have basically, yes, and we have basically, yes, and we have basically no marketing in China. And China, we are getting incredible traction in China, like Shapr3D educational centers opening up in China organically, and we didn't do anything about it. We are getting pictures from our customers that I've just participated in a Shapr3D course,
and you're like what?
yes, it's crazy, and actually in terms of downloads, China is the #1 country for Shapr right now. We are getting more downloads from China than from the US. So it's crazy, and we are quite excited. It's a whole different world, of course. So we will probably have to have a joint venture.
It's a tough market. It's a tough market. Yeah.
Yes,
but I mean that's
a tough market.
That's like the type of adoption where you have this like organic adoption where there's already, it's almost like you're building this ecosystem of like somebody has gone and taken the initiative to sort of like build out like an education sort of like sort of infrastructure for you guys in China, which is amazing.
Yes, I had a chat with one of the biggest funds that have a very strong Chinese presence, and I had a chat with their Chinese leader, and he said that typically those Western companies that have this kind of organic traction without any investment, these are the kind of companies that can become successful in China. And Canva is one of the examples. Like Canva had exactly this, and they set up a joint venture in China, and now a very significant part of their revenues are coming from China. So I think Shapr is a good candidate for Chinese expansion.
Yeah, you actually might be one of the very rare ones, to be honest. Like the more and more I think about it, just considering sort of like your space, both there's the PLG piece and like I said, just China being sort of, whether we like it or not, it's like the being sort of the major manufacturing hub for the world. Seems like that makes a lot of sense, right? Like a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
So I think we're rounding up on the last sort of like, I guess last minute. Any final tips you have for anybody, for young startup founders? What would any last words of advice that you want to share? Thank you. And by the way, this has been fantastic. So thank you. I learned a lot about Shapr today. Any final feedback or advice that you would give to a new startup founder?
Never quit.
Yeah. Just have to grind through it, right? It's a grind. You just got to grind through it.
It's the only thing that you should never do is quitting. Like never quit. That's the secret sauce.
All right. Well, listen, man. Thank you very much for your time. And by the way, if you're raising a round, man, let me know. I'm in the market. I'm investing now, so let me know.
Will do. Okay, definitely.
All right.
You heard it. You heard it first here, folks. Marvin's investing into Shapr3D. So
yeah, if you let me. If you let me.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah, this was really a treat. So thank you both. And yeah, never give up, even when it comes to logging in on Hopin. So
exactly.
You did.